Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to be making two cards with the Stitchmas Christmas collection from Spellbinders. This collection has several products, but I'm only going to be demonstrating two of them, which are the Stitched Joy dies and Stitched Ornament dies. First, let's take a look at the Stitched Joy dies. These are a set of 8 thin metal cutting dies. They include the word joy, which is surrounded by lots of florals and leaves. You can even use the word joy on a card by itself without using the surrounding dies because those letters are separate dies. There are also extra dies that you can use to layer and add dimension to the main die. And what's special about these dies is that they are used for stitching with embroidery floss and a needle. However, you don't have to stitch with your dies. You most certainly can use them as is. And here's a look at the Stitched Ornament dies. This includes a set of 6 thin metal cutting dies, which creates a Christmas ornament. It also comes with an ornament topper as well as sprig moffets to hang on. So you can see all of the dies included there. There are also 3 other dies that are included in this Stitchmas Christmas collection. I don't have them personally, so I am going to just pop up some pictures here on the screen. This picture is the Stitched Diamond dies, which includes a background that covers an A2 card front, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The background is comprised of lots of diamond shapes that can be stitched. And then this one is the Stitched Petal diamond background. It's another background for an A2 card front, and you can stitch the designs to make several stitched floral backgrounds on the card front. And last but not least is the Circle Strip Slimline stitched dies, which includes 6 dies to make stitch borders, backgrounds, and ornaments on your Slimline card. And as always, I will have links to all of these products down in the description box below. If you are interested in purchasing any of these products, as always, I appreciate when you use my affiliate links, as I do get a small commission on every sale when you click on my link, and that's always at no extra cost to you. So for my first card, I'm going to be using the Stitched Joy dies, and I die cut the large die with a piece of white cardstock. I did use a thicker cardstock. You always want to use a thicker cardstock when doing stitching, just because you want the cardstock to withstand all of the stitching that you're going to be doing. I believe my cardstock is about 80 pounds in weight, so I would suggest 80 pounds in weight or a thicker cardstock. You also will need to select what embroidery floss you are going to be using. I just picked out some colors here. Now my embroidery floss I picked up at Joann's, and Spellbinders does sell embroidery floss on their website. I will have a link to that as well, but I like going to Joann's because they are all individual colors and you can just pick out the colors that you want. This is the DMC embroidery floss, and this color is number 816. I will also have those color numbers listed down in the description box in case you want to duplicate any of these colors. So each piece of embroidery floss comes with 6 strands. So what I'm doing is I am just separating the strands. When you're using the Spellbinders dies that are embroidery dies, you want to make sure that you separate your strands into 2 strands. So as I said, each piece comes with 6 strands, and I'm just separating to get 2 strands, and that's what I'm going to use when I do my stitching. So once I have my 2 strands separated, I'm going to take the end and form a loop. And you want to make sure that you're using a tapestry needle because the eye of the tapestry needle is a little bit larger and wider than a regular sewing needle, which makes it easier to thread. Now Spellbinders does recommend using a size 22 tapestry needle. They do not sell the needles on their website, however you can pick them up at your local sewing store. So let's take a look at this die up close. Notice that all along the outside you have all of the holes, and then for each hole you have an embossed line that connects to another hole. So when you're threading, those lines are indicative of how your thread is going to be positioned. So from one hole to the other hole. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how this works here. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come in from the bottom of my die cut And I'm going to leave a little piece of the thread that extends on the back side of the die cut piece. Notice that I did not put a knot in that thread. I'm just going to lay it flat on the back of the die cut piece and add some washi tape to secure it in place. Next, I'm going to flip my die cut piece back over so that I'm looking at the front, and then I'm going to look for that embossed line, and I'm going to put my needle through the top of the hole on the top of the die cut in the corresponding hole where that embossed line ends. Next, I'm going to come up from the bottom of the die cut in the next hole where I originally started, and I'm going to repeat the process by putting the needle in the top of the same hole. So you can see that for that particular petal that I'm working on right now, all of the strands are being inserted in the same hole towards the bottom of the petal. And I'm going to continue this process for all 9 of the holes for this individual petal. And once I finish this petal, I'll move on to the next petal using the same thread. So here is the 9th hole for that single petal. I finished that petal, and now I'm going to start with the next petal by coming up through the bottom of each one of those holes on that second petal, and I will be going down into the bottom center hole. Again, following all of those embossed lines on that petal. And I'll continue this process until this second petal is complete, and then I'll move on to the third petal. And once I finish all 3 of those petals, I'm going to turn my die cut piece over, and I'm going to secure this thread because I need to start with another color. So I'm going to come up underneath the threads that are already in place, and I'm going to form a loop and put my needle through that loop and tie that off. And then I'm going to snip off that thread with my scissors, and I'm ready to start another section of this piece. I'm going to bring in another color red. It's slightly brighter than this dark red I initially used. This color is number 321. So I'm going to repeat the process of everything that I've just done by taking a strand of the embroidery floss, snipping it off, and then I will take 2 strands from this embroidery floss. Once I have my 2 strands, I'll go ahead and put this in a loop at the end, and I will insert it into my needle. I'm going to go ahead and insert it into the bottom of the die cut through one of the holes. Remember to not let the strand go all the way through the hole. Leave a little bit on the back side of the die cut and tape that down in place with a piece of washi tape. And then flip your die cut piece back over and begin your stitching. Again, same process as the previous petals. So I'm going to come down to the bottom center of the petal that I'm working on, and then come up through the die cut piece on one of the holes on the end of the petal, and then come down into the bottom center. And I'm going to repeat that process with all of the petals on this particular section. So I went ahead and finished all of the 3 sets of petals on this die cut piece. The 2 petals on the left, I used the dark red embroidery floss number 816, and the one on the right is the bright red, which is number 321. And now I'm going to bring in some greens. I have a 964 and a 3812, so 2 different color greens that I'm going to use for some of the leaves in this die cut piece. So I'm starting with the lighter green in the top right. I went ahead and threaded my needle, and I came in through the bottom of the leaf, and I just want to show you here how I'm actually going to use the same piece of washi tape, and I'm just going to lift it up and tuck under this embroidery floss underneath that. That way I don't have to use another piece of washi tape. So this particular one is a little bit different. I want to go ahead and show you the detail on here. So notice how my thread is coming up through the bottom hole. I want to stitch this line of holes up through the center of this leaf. And then after I do that, I'm going to stitch from the center to the right side, and then from the center to the left side. So I'm going to start out with the center set of holes. So I'm going to come down to the hole immediately next to the last hole, and I'll pull that embroidery floss tightly, and then I'm going to come up through the bottom of the die cut through the third hole, and then I'm going to come down through the second hole. I'm going to come up through the fourth hole, and then I'm going to go down into the third hole. And then to finish up that line, I'm going to come up through the fifth hole, and then I'm going to go down through the fourth hole. So what I've done is I've just done a line of stitching along the center of that leaf. Now I'm ready to do the sides, so I'm going to come up through the first hole there on the bottom and then come down through the center, and I'm going to repeat that process coming up through all of those holes on the side of that leaf and coming down through the center. And once I finish all 4 holes on the bottom of that leaf, I'm going to work my way up to the top, and I'm going to repeat that process, bringing all of that embroidery floss to the center from those top holes. And once that leaf is complete, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to tie off this thread because I want to move on to a different color. So I'm going to just put my needle through the floss that's on the back. I'm just going to loop it off, and then I'm going to cut it off with my scissors. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the leaves on this die cut piece by using a mix of the 2 color threads that I previously showed you. Next, I need to work on these little round flowers that are in the die cut piece. So you can see them here at the bottom of the petals, and then there are some other ones that are scattered around this die cut piece. I am going to be using a darker red. This is number 816, and I want to go ahead and show you how to do these circular shapes. I'm going to come in through the center of that circular shape and tape off the back with a piece of washi tape, and then I'm going to basically come from the circle to each one of the holes along the outside of that circle. My thread was getting stuck on these petals, so I'm just fixing it here, and then I'll just pull that through tightly, and I'm going to just repeat this process by coming up through the bottom of the die cut on the hole immediately next to the one I just did, and then I'm coming down through the center, and I'm going to go all around this circle piece, coming up through the bottom and down through the center for each one of these holes. And I'm going to repeat that process for all of the circle shapes at the bottom of all of those petals. So you can see I've done all of them. And then last but certainly not least, I'm going to do the other ones that are just scattered randomly throughout this die cut using 2 different threads. I have some different golds. I have a number 676 and a 680. I'm going to go ahead and work on these off camera. Now all of the embroidery is completed on my die cut piece. You can see I did a couple of the light golds, and then I did some of the darker golds just to have variation in color throughout. I also did a couple of the extra die cut pieces, but I did these in a different color gold. The thread I use for these is a gold glitter, and that is E3852. So you can see it kind of has a sparkle and shine to that thread. And then I also die cut the word joy out of some of the Spellbinders gold mirror cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the back of each one of those letters and add it to my die cut piece. Now that this die cut piece is completed, I'm going to set it aside and I'll pick up making the card a little bit later, but first I want to show you the stitched ornament. So for this ornament die, I die cut the center die and the outside die together out of some white cardstock, and it cut the ornament shape out. I'm just going to use this little brush tool to get all of these little pieces out of the dots, and I'm going to use some blue and silver embroidery floss. I'm going to start out with this blue embroidery floss. This is number 311. Already threaded my needle. I'm going to stitch the top and bottom of the ornament since they are both similar, and notice it's very similar to the circle design in the Stitched Joy dies because you have the center circle and then the circles along the outside, and all of the outside circles will have embroidery floss that extends to the center circle. So I am just bringing my needle up through the back of my die cut piece. I'm going to go ahead and add some washi tape to hold this down, and I am starting on the outside edge rather than the center because I need to have some room here to add the washi tape. I didn't want the washi tape to go over those dots, so that's why I didn't start in the center. I'm just starting on the outside, and then I'm going to bring it down into the center circle, and I'm going to repeat that process for all of these outside circles by bringing my needle up through the bottom of the die cut of the outside hole and then down through the center hole, and just repeating that process throughout that section. So now I finished both the top and bottom sections of that ornament in this darker blue thread, and now I'm going to come in with a brighter or lighter blue thread. This is number 995, and this one is going to go on the inside circles. There are 3 inside circles to this ornament. So you can see an up close look here and all of the embossed lines that lead from the center circle to the outside circles. So I'm going to do the same process with all 3 of these circles. And next there's this little section, there's 4 of these sections with these little tiny group of 4 circles at the top and 1 circle at the bottom. And I'm just outlining them here with my needle so you can see what they look like. And these sections I'm going to add some silver embroidery floss, and I'm going to be bringing in this silver, it's like a glittery silver embroidery floss. It is labeled E415. I went ahead and stitched all of those 4 sections so you can see how it goes from the bottom hole to each of the 4 holes above it. Next, I'm going to be working on the outside circles. So I'm just pointing them out here with my needle. So all of these outside circles. The embroidery floss that I'm going to be using for the outline of circles is number 517. And for these, you really just need to do a back stitch. There is no center circle to connect them to. You're just doing a back stitch all along the outside of the circle pattern. And this is done exactly the same way as I did it in the Stitched Joy die cut where I stitched the line in the leaves. So now my ornament is all put together. I'm ready to go ahead and create 2 cards using the Stitched Ornament and the Stitched Joy. So I'm going to take this die. This die is just a decorative die that will go over the top and bottom part of the ornament. I'm cutting out a piece of the silver mirror cardstock, putting some double-sided adhesive tape on the back, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. I'm actually going to do it twice. I'm only showing once here on camera, and I also die cut the ornament topper out of the same silver cardstock. So now my die cut piece is like a sticker, and I can just remove it and stick it right to the top of the ornament. I'm going to do the same thing with the one on the bottom. I'm just going to take my poker tool and poke out these pieces of cardstock that were stuck behind in these little circle parts of this die cut piece. Next, I took the ornament shape die and die cut a piece of the silver mirror cardstock, and I'm going to add glue to the back of my ornament and add it to the ornament shape that I die cut out of the silver cardstock. And since there's some texture underneath that cardstock layer, in order to hold that down, I am going to be using an acrylic block until my adhesive is dry. For the background of my cards, I'm going to bring in some of my Spellbinders 3D embossing folders. This embossing folder is called Circle Illusion. And I'm using the brand new Spellbinders Universal Plate System in order to emboss my cardstock using these embossing folders. I previously did a video using this Universal Plate System, and I will link it here at the top right hand corner of this video. And using the Universal Plate System, it gives you the best impressions when using your Spellbinders 3D embossing folders. So I have the platform A down first, then I have the embossing folder with the cardstock and my adapter plate B on top, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, and when that comes out, I'm going to take a look at the beautiful impression of that embossing folder on the cardstock. You can see all of that detail from that 3D embossing folder. I did cut my cardstock down to 4 by 5 1/4, but what's nice about these embossing folders is that they are large enough for slimline cards. because they're 8.5 inches long. So this embossing folder is the Spellbinders Beveled Diamonds embossing folder. So again, I start with my Platform A base, I add my cardstock into the embossing folder, and then I add the adapter plate D on top, and I run that through my die cutting machine and take a look at this beautiful design. So I have my embossed background in the navy blue, and then I have a piece of silver mirror cardstock that I cut down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I am cutting the center out using a Spellbinders rectangular die, and that allows me to save that center cardstock for another project. I'm going to add the silver cardstock there to the front of an A2 size card base. My card base measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and then I'm going to add the embossed background right to the top of that. Now I'm going to arrange the ornament right on the center of that card front. I did die cut the leaves out of some of the silver mirror cardstock as well, and I'm going to go ahead and add my ornament topper to the top of the ornament, and then I'm going to add those leaves. The leaves are thin enough that they can actually go through the hole in that topper. And I'm also using a sentiment called Deck the Halls, and that is from the Spellbinders Mix and Match Holiday Greetings. And there are so many sentiments from that collection, such as Merry Christmas, Sending Hugs, Holiday Cheer, Peace and Joy, and many more. I die cut the Deck the Halls sentiment out of the silver mirror cardstock with some double-sided adhesive tape on the back. So now these are stickers, and I could just stick them to my card front. And that makes it so much easier than trying to put glue on the back of these thin letters. I go ahead and glue down the ornament in the center. I wanted to put the words down first so that I knew exactly where to put the ornament and so that they didn't overlap each other. And now I'm going to go ahead and glue down these leaves, and I'm going to stick the end through the hole in the ornament topper. I'm going to do that for both of the leaves. I do put an acrylic block on the top of the ornament just to hold it down onto that embossed cardstock, because remember, it does have lots of dimension there, and I want to make sure it sticks really well. Okay, so I'm taking some silver gems that were in my stash, adding them to the centers of the ornament. I am putting a little bit of glue in the center and then adding the gem on top just to make sure it doesn't fall off on that embroidery floss. I'm also going to do the centers of the embroidery floss there at the top and bottom of the ornament as well. And now that card is completed. So let's finish up the Stitch Joy card. I have a piece of gold mirror cardstock that I cut down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I did cut the center out to save that cardstock for another project. And I'm going to go ahead and add the rectangle onto an A2 size card base that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to add my embossed background right to the top. And that embossed background is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And for this one, I'm going to add some foam to the back. I die cut the letters Joy out of some double-sided adhesive foam, and then I'm just popping the foam on the back side of where those letters go. And then I'm just going to cut down this other foam and just layer it on to the different areas of the back of the die cut. And then I'll go ahead and add the die cut piece to the center of my card front. And then I'm going to bring in these extra die cut leaves, and I'm going to tuck them in some of the places there on the sides of the large Joy die cut. But these are going to lay flat on the card front. I'm just going to put glue on the back and then just press them down to my card front. I'm going to add some of the Spellbinders gold gems to the centers of some of those circles on the front of the card. And then that's going to complete this card. So I hope you liked my cards today. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I use for my cards today, check down in the description box for those affiliate links. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.